Warning! Kina Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevin Odelberg, host of Kina Murdery, a podcast that's about more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories. The unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. That's right, folks, I said it then and I mean it now. I am Zevin Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery, and I am so glad that you are here with me. I hope you found last week's Season 7 premiere episode about John Wayne Gacy featuring his death row attorney Karen Conti, if not entertaining, then compelling. But I don't know about you, after all the dark horror and, frankly, unthinkable corruption of humanity that Gacy shows us, I felt like I needed a little bit of a palate cleanser this week. And so, I'm bringing you a story that's much less killer clown and much more catch me if you can. In the San Juan Islands, off the coast of Washington State, there's an island called Camano, and there, in the shadowy corners of Camano Island, lived a young man named Colton Harris-Moore, a young man whose reckless genius was quietly taking root. Colt was born in 1991, and as he grew older, he would emerge as not merely a troubled teenager, but as a captivating figure who danced on the edge of legality. He became infamous as the Barefoot Bandit, a moniker earned from his habit of executing crimes shoeless, a predilection that added a certain mystique to his already audacious exploits. Today, I bring you the story of the seemingly carefree capers of a legendary adolescent criminal genius known as the Barefoot Bandit. Carefree is probably the wrong word, though, as it seems probable that Colton's mad dash romp through life and criminality was as much a trauma response as anything else. Please join me as we uncover what truths we can and solve what mysteries we may. Kinda Murderies, Wild Colt, the Barefoot Bandit, starts now. The outlaw legend of the Barefoot Bandit, although it may sound like it, doesn't in fact belong to the American Old West. Colton Harris-Moore's criminal career belongs in fact to our own millennium. That story begins in 2007. Now, Harris-Moore's crimes weren't petty acts of vandalism, but rather a spree that captured the nation's imagination and law enforcement's frustration. His escapades included stealing cars, boats, and even airplanes, an improbable feat for someone with no formal training. And his ability to evade capture became legendary, turning him into a media sensation and earning him a legion of online admirers who viewed him as a modern-day folk hero, a sort of adolescent Robin Hood or teenage Butch Cassidy. But not everyone was so enamored. Critics pointed to the trail of victims left in his wake, each one facing the reality of lost property and violated privacy. The debate raged. Was he in fact Robin Hood or simply a criminal? One thing is for sure, though. Colt was just a kid. The saga of Colton Harris-Moore began long before his feet ever touched a crime scene. When he drew his first breath on March 22, 1991, nestled in the humble surroundings of Skagit Valley Hospital. Born to Pamela Kohler and Gordon Moore, Colton's life began under the shadow of his father's struggles with drugs and alcohol. A battle that led to his father Gordon's swift departure from the family while Colton was still a toddler. Pamela Kohler, now a single parent, was left to navigate the rocky waters of raising a child alone on Camano Island. Their home, a worn single-wide trailer, echoed with the challenges of financial hardship. It was a stark backdrop for Colton's formative years. The air in the cramped confines of that trailer was thick with tension and instability as Pamela wrestled with her own demons, seeking solace in alcohol, which she frequently abused. In this turbulent environment, young Colton began to show signs of behavioral issues, a testament to the chaos around him. His early years were marked by rebellion against the structure and constraints imposed upon him, setting the stage for the extraordinary life that lay ahead. Colton's story in many ways is one of survival and adaptation in a world that offered him few comforts or certainties. By the age of 7, Colton Harris-Moore was already a ghost in his own life, slipping away from the chaos at home and vanishing into the wild embrace of the nearby forests. Running away became a ritual for Colt, a bid for freedom and a test of his wits against nature. Days would pass before he re-emerged, with a toughness and self-confidence honed by the harsh lessons of survival, a classic tale of man versus nature, or in this case, boy versus nature, or perhaps not versus, as nature, it seems, provided a certain comfort, a shield against the emotional damage inflicted on a young man trapped in a tiny trailer with an alcoholic mother. The lush forests of Camano Island were Colt's companion, a friend, an escape, a reality that he could make his own, challenges that he could choose and conquer. And in those woods, Colton became adept at the art of stealth. He began breaking into vacation homes, not out of malice, but necessity, taking food and camping supplies to sustain himself. These acts, born of desperation, marked the beginning of his relationship with crime, a relationship that would grow more intricate and complex as he did. By the age of 12, Colton faced the cold reality of his choices. His first conviction for stolen property was a stark reminder of the world he was navigating, yet, even as the legal system tightened its grip, Colton's spirit remained unyielding. Within a year, he found himself in juvenile detention centers, the consequences of a growing list of convictions. These institutions, designed to correct, only served to deepen his resolve and refine his skills. In the crucible of confinement, Colton Harris-Moore was forging a path that would soon capture the nation's attention. Colt's academic journey was as turbulent as his home life. He began at Stanwood Middle School, where his penchant for defiance quickly became evident. Discipline became a constant theme, leading to his transfer to Lincoln Hill Alternative School, also in Stanwood. The new environment did little to curb his rebellious streak. His time at Lincoln Hill mirrored his previous experiences, marked by a steady erosion of interest and attendance. By the time he'd reached 9th grade, school had become an afterthought. His presence in the classroom dwindled until he finally dropped out altogether, and eventually Child Protective Services took notice, making several visits to the Harris-Moore residence. Concerns about neglect and abuse loomed large, prompting the authorities to intervene. Colton was placed in temporary foster care, a move intended to shield him from the instability that plagued his upbringing, yet even in foster care, the seeds of his independence and resilience continued to grow, setting the stage for the legendary escapades that would soon follow. With school no longer an anchor in his life, Colton Harris-Moore drifted further into a world defined by his own rules. But the days when Colt would routinely outwit the law had not yet arrived. The legal system had him in its sights, and on July 14, 2006, a warrant for his arrest was issued when he skipped a mandatory court date. The net was closing in, and Harris-Moore, now acutely aware of his wanted status, vanished into the wilds of Camano Island. Vanished into the forests that had always been his sanctuary, a place where the only laws were the laws of nature. And in those dense woods, he carved out a life on the run, setting up hidden campsites that served as temporary homes. His skills in evasion were matched only by his knack for survival, as he continued to burglarize homes for food and essentials. Each break-in was a calculated risk, a test of his audacity and stealth. Some of the homes he targeted contained treasure troves of technology, computers that became his window to the wider world. He used them to dedicate himself in the dark arts of identity theft. Mastering this skill, Harris-Moore began ordering credit cards in the names of the homeowners, a move that allowed him to procure not just food, but also cutting-edge survival gear. Night vision goggles were among his acquisitions, giving him an edge over those who sought to capture him. With each successful operation, he stayed one step ahead of the law, deepening his legend as the Barefoot Bandit. His exploits were a blend of ingenuity and desperation, marking him both as a criminal but also as a cunning survivalist. On February 9, 2007, the cat-and-mouse game that Colton Harris-Moore had played with the law once again came to a temporary end. After more than 6 months of living on the edge, he was finally captured and arrested, bringing his run to a halt. The list of charges against him was long and varied, with 23 criminal counts looming over his head, most stemming from his spree of residential burglaries. Faced with the weight of evidence and the prospect of a lengthy sentence, Harris-Moore struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for pleading guilty to 3 of the charges, he accepted a 3-year sentence. His new home would be Green Hill School, a high-security juvenile detention facility located in Chehalis. It was a stark transition from the freedom of the forests to the confines of a cell. Green Hill appeared to be a serious setback in the life of our young fugitive, but even behind bars, the legend of the Barefoot Bandit continued to grow, fueled by the daring nature of his escapades and the sheer audacity of his flight from the law. Colt quickly adapted to life at Green Hill School, showing all the signs of a model inmate. His good behavior earned him a transfer on February 14, 2008 to the Griffin Home Residential Treatment Center in Renton. This facility was a minimum security halfway house designed to help troubled youths reintegrate into society, a place where second chances were the norm. But to some watching Colton, his transformation seemed too good to be true. Skeptics whispered that his impeccable conduct was nothing more than a clever facade, a calculated move to position himself for another escape. The skeptics proved prescient when just 2 months later, on April 29th, Harris-Moore skipped through an unlocked window at Griffin Home and vanished into the night. The authorities acted quickly, issuing a felony warrant for his arrest. Once again, Colt was on the run, and another chapter of the legend of the Barefoot Bandit was being written at breakneck speed. His knack for evading capture and his audacious escapes only fueled the intrigue around him, keeping him one step ahead of those determined to bring him back to justice. Colton Harris-Moore's escape from the Griffin home marked the beginning of another thrilling chapter in his life on the run. Almost instinctively, he stole a car, hotwired it, and made his way back to familiar territory, Kina Island. Here he returned to his old habits, breaking into homes to steal food and supplies, living off the land while evading capture. This time, however, the authorities were ready for him. Local law enforcement mounted an aggressive campaign to capture the elusive teenager, determined to put an end to his spree once and for all. They studied his patterns, anticipated his moves, and coordinated their efforts to close in on the young fugitive. Meanwhile, the local media had caught wind of Colt's exploits. News stories began to circulate, painting a picture of a mysterious teenage outlaw who continually slipped through the fingers of the law. His growing notoriety added fuel to the fire, transforming him into a folk legend and ensuring that his story reached a national audience. As the pressure mounted, Colton Harris-Moore found himself in the center of a cat-and-mouse game, with the stakes higher than ever. On July 18, 2008, his saga took a dramatic turn that catapulted his story into the national spotlight. It began with a high-speed pursuit on Kina Island as sheriff's deputies chased a black Mercedes careening down the road with reckless abandon. But then the driver, in a bold and unexpected move, bailed out and vanished into the thick cover of the surrounding woods. Although, if authorities had in fact been tracking the modus operandi of Colton Harris-Moore, his choice to bolt to the woods, and then the reality that he vanished inside them, probably should have been less of an unexpected move and more of a statistical certainty, if indeed it's appropriate to apply statistics to psychology, and in this case I think it is. When law enforcement searched the abandoned Mercedes, they uncovered a cache of stolen goods, credit cards, cell phones, and a digital camera. It was the camera that held the most revealing clues, a series of self-portraits taken by the driver. Among them was an image that would become iconic, a photograph of Harris-Moore lying on his back in a forest, staring defiantly into the lens. These photos left little doubt about the identity of the elusive driver, if indeed there had been any doubt to begin with. Colt was almost immediately identified as the face in the pictures, and the discovery sparked a media frenzy. The image of the young fugitive captured the public's imagination and spread like wildfire across the internet. With it came a growing fan base, intrigued by Colton's audacity and skill, and enthralled by the helter-skelter nature of his seemingly impossible and ever-elusive life on the run. Now 17, Colt had become more than just a criminal. He was a symbol of rebellion. It was at this point that he was officially dubbed the Barefoot Bandit for his penchant for leaving behind shoeless footprints at crime scenes. He became the stuff of legend, followed by fans who cheered his every escape and awaited the next twist in his story of daring and unconscionable freedom. He was seen by many as a symbol of almost primal liberty. His cunning, his refusal to kowtow to the conventions of society or the mechanical tyranny of laws that insist on confining us, molding us all into obedient little automatons. But whether or not Colt was some kind of legitimate philosophical folk hero, whose very existence was interpreted by some as a battle on behalf of the inherent freedom of all humans to determine their own destiny, with or without all that college essay interpretation, the truth was, the law was closing in on Colt on Kina Island, and he decided it was time for a change of scenery. And so, he commandeered a stolen boat and made his way to Orcas Island, seeking refuge from the intensifying pursuit. And, perhaps unsurprisingly, his arrival on a new island heralded a new wave of crime. In August 2008, reports of burglaries began to surge, sending ripples of fear through the small, tight-knit community. The sophistication of the break-ins left residents and authorities on edge, wondering who could be responsible. They should have known. It was Colton Harris-Moore. By October 2nd, 2008, the burglaries had become rampant enough that the police considered the situation dire, and a special meeting by the Orcas Chamber of Commerce was held. Citizens were outraged. The island's peace had been shattered, and the community demanded action. Police efforts intensified, and as the locals demanded to know the identity of the serial burglar, all signs pointed to one notorious fugitive. The Barefoot Bandit, Colton Harris-Moore, was the mastermind behind the thefts. In a daring move to escape the tightening dragnet on November 12, 2008, Colt decided to take to the skies. He broke into a hangar on the island, stole and hot-wired a single-engine airplane, a Cessna 182, and despite lacking any formal aviation training, he managed to get the plane airborne. His journey took him 300 miles east, culminating in a crash landing on the Yakima Indian Reservation. He then vanished into the landscape before the authorities could close in. The mystery of how he managed to pilot the aircraft was soon pieced together. Harris-Moore had long been fascinated by aviation, teaching himself to fly through a combination of reading aircraft manuals, watching instructional DVDs, and countless hours on Microsoft Flight Simulator, a pastime he had enjoyed since childhood. Inside the abandoned Cessna, investigators discovered a familiar calling card. Barefoot footprints inside the cockpit. It was undeniable. Colt had once again slipped through their fingers, leaving behind a trail that was both bold and as untraceable as the contrails of the stolen plane he flew. Colt's legend grew, casting him as an unlikely aviator who defied both gravity and the law in equal measure. The fallout from his latest escapade was swift and far-reaching. The stolen Cessna he'd used to make his escape belonged to none other than Bob Rivers, a well-known radio host on Seattle's KZOK-FM. Rivers learned of the theft right after wrapping up his morning show, and broadcast his shock and disbelief to the listeners who tuned in. A year later, as Harris-Moore remained elusive, Rivers spoke to his audience, saying, "I don't buy this folk hero stuff. I was furious that something like this could happen. I really want him caught." Unfazed by the uproar, Colt continued his life on the run, stealing cars and moving between cities like Reno, Sacramento, and eastern Washington. His trail of crimes expanded, and Island County prosecutors filed 10 charges against him, including identity theft and illegal flight to avoid prosecution. In May of 2009, Colt returned to his old stomping grounds on Kina Island, once again engaging in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with the Island County Sheriff's Department. He was becoming a master at this, and his confidence was growing with each successful evasion. In the early hours of June 19, 2009, Harris-Moore executed a bold break-in of a sheriff's patrol car parked in front of a deputy's house. His haul included police equipment, a cell phone, an official police rifle, and ammunition. This audacious act spurred the sheriff's department to intensify further their efforts to apprehend the teenage outlaw. But Colt, now 18, had grown more calculated, careful, and meticulous. Each move was planned, every detail considered. He remained a step ahead, a shadow slipping through the fingers of those who pursued him. His legend continued to grow, fueled by the sheer audacity, some might even say arrogance, of his crimes, and his uncanny ability to stay just beyond the reach of the proverbial long arm of the law. The summer of 2009 saw Colton Harris-Moore moving seamlessly between the islands of the Pacific Northwest. On September 11th of that year, he executed another brazen heist by stealing a Cirrus SR-22 from a public airport on San Juan Island. Again, he hotwired the plane and piloted it to Orcas Island, landing it neatly on the public runway. But he didn't linger. From Orcas he took a boat and sailed to Point Roberts, leaving a trail of burglaries across British Columbia that stretched down into Bonner's Ferry in northern Idaho. It was there, on September 29, 2009, that Colt made his next bold move. He broke into the Bonner's Ferry airplane hangar and stole his third plane, another Cessna 182. With remarkable self-taught skill, he flew the plane 260 miles westward. His destination was his original stomping grounds, his home, Camano Island. But fate, this time, had other plans for our young anti-hero. As the plane's fuel dwindled, he was forced to crash land near Granite Falls. The landing was a testament to his growing confidence and instinct, and, frankly, his flight skills, and he was able to walk away from it unscathed. In the aftermath, investigators found the telltale sign of Harris-Moore's presence in the Idaho airplane hangar, barefoot footprints that confirmed his involvement. When reporters questioned his mother, Pamela Kohler, about the theft and her son's exploits, she responded with unexpected pride. "I'm proud of him," she said. "I was going to send him to flight school, but I guess I don't have to." By October 2, 2009, the law further intensified its pursuit of Colton. A felony warrant for forced entry burglary was issued, soon followed by a federal arrest warrant linked to the Bonner's Ferry airplane theft. Colt's reputation as the Barefoot Bandit had grown, with authorities across Washington, Idaho, and Canada attributing around 100 thefts to him, spanning cars, airplanes, and speedboats. Undaunted by the mounting charges, the Barefoot Bandit continued his audacious spree. On February 10, 2010, he commandeered another Cirrus SR-22 from Anacortes Airport, flying it skillfully to Orcas Island. The very next day, he set his sights on homegrown grocery, breaking in and making off with more than $1,000 in cash. In a move that further cemented his infamous moniker, Colt left behind a trail of chalk footprints throughout the store's aisles. These cartoonish feet ended with a simple, taunting message. "See ya," spelled C-Y-A. It was a bold declaration of his continued defiance, a signature from the fugitive who had become a folk legend. The footprints were playful yet audacious, a reminder of his ability to evade capture, thumbing his nose at those who chased him, while capturing the public's imagination with every caper he successfully pulled off. The pursuit of Colton Harris-Moore had reached a fever pitch, with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security now in the mix. The hunt became an all-out federal manhunt. Agents descended upon Orcas Island while Coast Guard cutters prowled the surrounding waters, vigilant for any sign of suspicious activity. The deployment of Black Hawk helicopters underscored the seriousness of the situation, scouring the island from above in hopes of finally capturing the elusive fugitive. Despite the increased pressure, Colt once again slipped through the net. He made his way to nearby San Juan Island and from there piloted a stolen boat back to the familiar grounds of Camano Island. His uncanny ability to evade capture continued to frustrate law enforcement. In response, the FBI offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his arrest, hoping to entice someone to help bring the young outlaw to justice. Then, in a surprising twist, a handwritten note and $100 in cash were discovered on May 31, 2010 at a veterinary clinic in Raymond. The note read, Drove by, had some extra cash. Please use this money for the care of animals. Colton Harris-Moore, aka the Barefoot Bandit. This gesture added another layer to Harris-Moore's complex persona, hinting at a sense of compassion amidst his criminal exploits. The note only further fueled the public's fascination with the young fugitive, who had become a modern legend in his own right. In June of 2010, with the net closing in on him in Washington, Colton Harris-Moore embarked on a cross-country journey fueled by his signature brand of audacity and theft. He commandeered a series of stolen vehicles, making his way eastward as far as Illinois. And his remarkable run was far from over. On June 4, 2010, a Cessna was reported stolen from an airport in Bloomington, Indiana. All signs pointed to Harris-Moore as the culprit behind the theft. His plan was bold: to reach Cuba, a country without extradition treaties with the United States. This would be the ultimate escape, a flight from which he hoped he might never return. Leveraging his self-taught piloting skills, Colt flew the Cessna toward his intended destination, but the journey was fraught with challenges. He managed to navigate as far as the Bahamas, where his luck ran thin. Forced to crash-land the plane near Great Abaco Island, Harris-Moore emerged from the wreckage unscathed once again. Stranded, yet as ever unbowed and undeterred, he made his way to a nearby fishing village. There he survived by stealthily stealing food from local stores and restaurants and continuing to live by his wits as he had done so many times before. His legendary run had taken him thousands of miles, but the endgame was rapidly approaching. In the early hours of July 11, 2010, Colt's incredible run came to a dramatic end on Harbor Island in the Bahamas after weeks of eluding capture. His luck finally ran out thanks to a series of tips from local residents. The Bahamian police, determined to apprehend the notorious fugitive, closed in on him after he ran a stolen boat aground on a sandbar just off the shore. The authorities would be taking no chances with the capture of the infamous Barefoot Bandit. They disabled the boat's engine with gunfire and ordered Colt to surrender. Cornered and facing the inevitability of capture, Harris-Moore made one final desperate gesture. He put a gun to his head, threatening to end his life rather than to face arrest. In a tense standoff, officers talked him down, persuading him to drop the weapon. Realizing the futility of his situation, Colt surrendered to the authorities, bringing an end to a 2-year saga that had captured the imagination of people across the globe. His arrest marked the conclusion of a remarkable tale that had transformed him from a troubled teenager into a legendary fugitive, whose exploits would be recounted for years to come. 2 days after his capture, Colton Harris-Moore was extradited from Nassau, Bahamas to Miami, marking the end of his international flight. He was held in Miami until July 21st, when he was transferred to the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac, Washington. Over the next 2 years, he faced a litany of charges at county, state, and federal levels, reflecting the breadth and depth of his criminal activities. In state court, Colt was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with an additional 6 years handed down by the Island County Court. The legal process culminated in a federal district court in Seattle, where he faced federal charges. On January 27, 2012, a U.S. District Court advised Harris-Moore that it was, quote, time for a new life flight plan, underscoring the need for a fresh start. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison. Addressing the court, Colt expressed genuine remorse for his crimes. He spoke of his plans to become an aeronautical engineer upon his release, hoping to channel his fascination with flight into a productive career. His county, state, and federal sentences were consolidated, and he was transferred to Stafford Creek Correction Center in Aberdeen to begin serving his 6-year term. Shortly after entering prison, Harris-Moore sold the rights to his life story to 20th Century Fox for $1.4 million. Per the terms of his sentencing, the entire sum was directed toward restitution, ensuring that his victims received compensation for their losses. In 2016, Colt's mother faced a personal tragedy that would test his resolve in a new way. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and the prognosis was grim. Faced with the impending loss of his mom, Harris-Moore turned to the public for help. He set up a GoFundMe page, hoping to raise $230,000 to have his mother's body cryogenically frozen. In his appeal, he wrote, "Cryonic preservation is the only solution to save Pam," clinging to the hope that in the future medical advancements might one day cure her cancer. Despite his efforts, the campaign fell short, raising only $2,170.
When Colt's mom passed away on May 17, 2016, the funds were refunded to the donors because the goal was not met. It was a poignant moment in Harris-Moore's journey, highlighting the challenges of facing personal loss amidst a life of public scrutiny. Later that year, on September 2, 2016, 25-year-old Colton Harris-Moore was released from prison on probation. He transitioned to a halfway house near Seattle, where he began to rebuild his life outside the confines of incarceration. Embracing a more grounded lifestyle, he took a part-time clerical job with John Henry Brown, a Seattle attorney who had represented him in court. The job marked a new chapter for Colt Harris-Moore, where he sought stability and redemption. After years of being defined by daring escapades and high-profile run-ins with the law, he now faced the challenge of navigating a life that, while perhaps less thrilling, offered the possibility of genuine rehabilitation and growth. In December 2016, Colt took another step toward his dream of flying by launching a new GoFundMe page. His goal was to raise over $125,000 for flight school training, a legitimate path to the sky that he had so often longed for. On his page, he wrote passionately, "Now I'm 25 years old, free, and ready to do it, fly, legally. I love airplanes, but I will never steal one or break the law again. I broke the law big league when I was younger, but now it's time to focus on my career and life in the free world." However, despite having received $1.4 million from 20th Century Fox for the rights to his story, a sum that went entirely, as I mentioned, to restitution, Colt still owed his victims $129,000. Because of this outstanding debt, he was ordered to cease his fundraising efforts until the balance was paid in full. The GoFundMe page had raised $1,600 before it was shut down, and those funds were directed toward his court-ordered restitution. Feeling the weight of this setback, Harris-Moore took to Twitter expressing his disappointment. "I feel like my dream has been crushed," he said. "What a terrible feeling." His words reflected the frustration of a man trying to turn his life around, yet still shackled by the consequences of his past actions. As of September 2022, Colton Harris-Moore had largely retreated from the public eye, with his last notable appearance occurring in May 2019. During this time, he was interviewed by Jason Rance on KTTH 770 in Seattle, where he reflected on the journey that had shaped his life. Colt spoke candidly about his obsession with airplanes, describing the exhilaration of his first flight in 2008 when he took off in a stolen Cessna. "It's this uncontrollable obsession, that's really what it is," he mused. "It's something that you've dreamt about and waited for your entire life. And out of all the possibilities of that moment, no matter what the scenario or situation you find yourself in that one moment, you were exactly where you were supposed to be. And I wonder if I'll ever feel that again. It's one of those moments that I think you only get once or twice in your entire life." Despite the thrill of his past adventures, Colt expressed uncertainty about his future. "I think it's going to be difficult to have a normal life. I really do. In fact, I don't think I'm ever going to have a normal life," he admitted, acknowledging the shadows of his past that continued to loom over him, but also the thrill of being a world-famous outlaw. Since that interview, Colton Harris-Moore, the Barefoot Bandit, has completed his probation and chosen to live a reclusive life, erasing his presence from social media and leaving his current whereabouts unknown. His story remains a cautionary tale of youthful audacity and the long road to redemption, as I and the rest of the world wonder just exactly what lies ahead for the boy who became the man who was once known as the Barefoot Bandit. Personally, I've had a lifelong fascination with D.B. Cooper, who my family and friends used to toast every Thanksgiving when I was young. This, of course, was some 15 or more years before the terrible tragedy that was 9/11. And so the idea of the airplane hijacker that didn't harm anyone and got away for good seemed romantic because the horrors that airplane hijacking could cause were not yet really in our consciousness. So D.B. Cooper was always a romantic figure to me, and I can't help but think of Colton Harris-Moore as a sort of D.B. Cooper Jr. And whether he deserves it or not, I wish Colt, the boy, the man, the Barefoot Bandit, all the best. I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.
If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kina Murdery or email at kinamurdery@gmail.com.